Yes, Concordia. First of all, I'd like to welcome the bill. And the bill is about regulation. But I'd just like to say a few words about gambling. If the figure of 40,000 is correct, that the 44,000 who have a gambling addiction or a gambling problem, or we'll put another word, gambling beyond their wealth, I think we need to actually think of the absolute scale of that. That would fill most provincial football grounds or hurling grounds to the roof. It's a huge amount of people. It could relate to 3 or 4 times that affected directly by it in family members. And therefore, it's not an issue we can treat lightly. I think the figure also that the average we lose per adult is €470 a year is quite startling. I don't know how that figure was put together, but I presume that's on gambling, not on what most of us do in terms of buying lottery tickets and so on in the local club or good cause or charity, which isn't really gambling. You'd give that money, and if you're lucky enough to win, you're happy, and if you don't win, that's not why you gave it. You didn't give it to win. You didn't give it to gamble. You gave it for a cause. And therefore, I think we have to recognise that gambling is a major issue. Now, the second thing I recognise, you're not going to solve the problem, and nobody will ever solve the problem. It's not soluble, because people will find a way of gambling. And I have seen situations, there's a lot of talk here of online gambling, and it is particularly insidious and it is particularly easy. But if you want to gamble, you'll find a way. People have done it on bingo. People have done it on buying lottery tickets. If you're into gambling, you'll, as I said, find a way. And therefore, there's no way of preventing people losing money on gambling. We can reduce the incidence, but we can't eliminate it. And I think we have to be realistic about that. It's not something I take easily, because I have seen the effects of gambling, and I've seen the effects of hidden gambling, and I've seen people who I found out afterwards were gambling who would be the last people in the world, male and female, that they think were gambling. And as you know, there's a saying in Irish, you never know where the shoe is laid. And when you find out people who you thought were in comfortable circumstances, that were up to their necks in debt because of gambling. Now, where this is leading me to is to the issue of how you help those who will inevitably, no matter what laws we bring, what precautions we bring in, we think we can solve everything by law, but you can't. What attitudes, societal attitudes, are we going to take to people who have an addiction to gambling? In more recent times, we have been more realistic about addiction to drink, that it is a disease that needs treatment. We have plenty of treatment centres around the country. We recognise that it's not so simple as to blame people. You have to try to help them to solve their problem. Because at a certain level of addiction, it's hard to put culpability in there, because the person loses control of their own actions. That's what an addiction is all about. We understand the same thing about drug addicts, and a lot of people would say, get the drug pushers, but don't start locking up the drug addict. Try get them treatment, try get them support, try wean them off the drugs. And the reality is that I would hope that society would take the same attitude to those who have an addiction to gambling, that they would see it as a medical condition, like all addictions, and we deal with it medically, not criminally. Now, we all have seen sad cases in the newspapers over the years where people have been brought to court for theft, who have been particularly theft against their employers. We've seen people even in the public service caught up in this particular situation. And inevitably, when you start digging behind, in a high percentage of cases, you find the person has a gambling addiction. And therefore, I think it is important that we would address this issue and debate this issue and try to see how we change societal attitudes. so that we can deal with this issue in the way that all addiction should be dealt with, is trying to assist the person. I'd like to pay tribute here tonight to all the people in Gamblers Anonymous and all those different groups, all those different charities who quietly help people with this gambling addiction, because it is as insidious, and in certain ways it's worse than a drinking addiction, because there comes to a point, if you keep drinking, that you will physically collapse. With the gambling, you can keep going and going and going until you have taken everything, not only in your own life, but in the lives of those around you in terms of money. And I have seen that happen. I do think, however, Minister, that there are small steps we can take to reduce the normalisation of gambling. The only gambling I ever do is buy lottery tickets in local charities, I'll be honest with you. People might think I'm very prissy, I have no interest in gambling on horses. And I don't buy the national lottery tickets or Euro Millions, they hold no attraction to me. Maybe I don't know what is in me, but that type of gambling frightens me, and also it doesn't have an attraction. But there are people who are attracted, and often they're people of little means who dream someday they're going to hit the Euro jackpot or whatever, and they spend beyond their means on a fairly consistent basis. Now, these people wouldn't have an addiction, but they would be spending beyond their means. I think we also have to recognise that there's been a huge increase in the talk about gambling, the talking about odds, the talking about bets. I have to say I do not like listening to radio or television commentators talking about the odds on various, who's going to get the first goal or who's going to score within 10 minutes at the beginning of a match or whatever. Actually, I don't think it's good practice. I think it's unnecessary. For 99% of the public, it just washes over them. But for those who have this addiction, it's an unnecessary normalisation of gambling on every kind of conceivable thing that you could dream of. I have to say that if you had asked me 10 years ago, about, we say, football betting, I would have thought you might bet on the result of a match. But there must be 50 ways and 100 ways of betting in any one match. And even during the matches, the betting is going on, and that's not going to be stopped. But the reality is, the promotion of that on radio, television and so on, in my view, is not positive. And I think it's something we should maybe talk to the likes of the BAI and so on about, because it's not conducive. Now, I also have to say that there's a lot of talk tonight about online betting, and I accept that's the big one. It's very hard to control that. But I have to also say that I always find, no more than with drink ads, where the person is selling the drink as hard as they can, and at the end of the ad they say, about being aware of problem drinking or whatever they say. And similarly, you get these ads promoting lotteries. I'm not talking about the lottery in your local club. I'm talking about the big national and European lotteries. And then at the bottom, there's the kind of, beware of, abusing this. But why do all this advertising if you're not trying to suck people in? It's a contradiction in terms, and I have to say, I don't buy the industry's argument, well, we put a little statement at the end and that's going to actually frighten off the person with the addiction. I think it's slightly disingenuous. So as I said, I think we need a debate, and a debate about how we treat the people who are never going to get into trouble, that will never present get into trouble. You could bring all the legislation you wanted in here, and it would be about as effective as prohibition was in America. And I recognise that. And I'm not a killjoy, and if people bet responsibly and all the rest, and for the vast majority of people who have a bit of a flutter and it doesn't impact on the resources, on their family resources, no problem. But I think we have to decide how we're going to support and help those people who do get into trouble, who do get the addiction. And whether we criminalise them, which I think is wrong, or whether we try to support them and wean them of the addiction, I think that is a debate that we need to have, and to have in the near future. And is the state willing, for example, to levy the industry through the tax system to provide the supports for people who get into gambling difficulties, and the families who suffer hugely from the effects of gambling? Can I say to you, on the other hand, Minister, I like Section 9, if I understand Section 9. I've always thought that, you know, if we look at the big scene of this, and then if we look at what a lot of people have lotteries and draws for, my big concern, I think all of our big concern, is more about the charity regulation side of this business, to make sure that money is collected by local lotteries and so on, go to the sources. But I've always made, had the view that the big corporates and so on, or somebody on a national body running a raffle, it's right that there are a huge amount of controls. But I think the local parish draw, I think the less controls there, the better. People know who they're giving it to. Normally, it's well announced how much money was made. Normally, the cause is fairly transparent to your parish, and normally people know exactly what's going on. And I have to say, I welcome Section 9, where you say that you could have a lottery, and that maybe the price of the ticket, maybe you could allow up to a tenner. In other words, I see this this isn't gambling. This is not gambling. You know it's not gambling. I get people coming into me all the time trying to sell me tickets. There's a certain group of people who stick me for nearly a £5 a week. It's very harmless. I know it's a very, very, very good cause, and I admire the tenacity of which they've gone about collecting a massive sum of money for a very, very genuine and good cause within one of the parishes in my area. I don't expect to win. I don't care if I win, and if they come back someday and tell me I've won 50 or 100 euro or 200 euro, I'll be happy. But I don't do it for that. I think those type of lotteries are very, very different, because they're not the ones that cause addiction. That's not where you go when you've got an addiction, looking for a lottery here and a lottery there for a local cause. That's not what happens. And I do welcome that very pragmatic approach you're taking, which is separating the bigger, higher level problems away from the ordinary thing we all do to collect money for the million good causes in our parish, our area, our town, or village, or whatever they call them nowadays. And that are literally done for the cause, and where the prize is not the inducement, the prize actually is the cause itself for which the money is being collected. So, Minister, as I said, I welcome the bill. I think you yourself, if I get any feeling from your body language there, recognise that this bill is limited in what it's going to achieve and doesn't claim to be the solution to all problems. And what I'd say is, I think on the wider issue of problem gambling, we need a debate, and we need to set the tone of how society is going to deal with this. And finally, as I said, its advertising promotion of big-time gambling is something that I have a bit of an issue with, and I think we have to look at.